Welcome to the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Karnes. I help business leaders and small business owners build the dream team their business needs so they can have more freedom in their role and in life to focus on what's most important. This week on the podcast, I'm hosting Mandy Keene. She is a coach, been in coaching for 26 years, has learned from some of the best like Tony Robbins, and we just have a great conversation. We talk about personality assessments, curiosity is a big topic, and really about what does radical self-ownership look like and how can you utilize self-awareness to make yourself and your business better. So this is a great conversation. Can't wait for you to hear it with Mandy. Before we get there, I did write a book called Master Your First Job, displayed prominently behind me here. In that book, I lay out the remarkable path from first day to first promotion. I really want to help young employees thrive in their first roles. If you'd like a free copy of this book, you can go to masteryourfirstjob.com/free. And if you know someone or employ someone who needs this book, this is a great resource for you to help them as well. You can get that at masteryourfirstjob.com/free and get that book for free. Let's dive into my conversation with Mandy Keene. Mandy, thanks so much for being on the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. I'd love for you to take a few minutes, share a little bit about you and your story.
Thank you, Jacob. I've been looking forward to being on your podcast. I really appreciate all of the quality guests that you've had, and I've listened to a few of your episodes and took some notes. So it's really refreshing when you hear new content, right? Like, oh, I didn't think of that. Thank you for what you're doing for entrepreneurs and business owners. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks. I'd love for you to share a little bit about you, your story. Tell me about Mandy.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to do, you know, what's funny, Jacob, is so I started coaching 26 years ago, and I used to say, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. Yeah. And then I started coaching people in their 20s and early 30s and like Reader's Digest. And I thought, oh, I have to update my like talking points. And so now I say, I'll give you the Snapchat version. So that's like my instead of Reader's Digest, I'll give you the Snapchat version of my story. I always like to thank and blame my mama because I was raised by a very driven entrepreneur, single mom, and she was really passionate about personal growth. And our home was, if you've ever walked into a Barnes and Noble, I don't know if they're out of business yet, but if you ever walked into like a bookstore and there was like the self-help section, that was our home growing up. Is my mom had every book you could get, every, tape set you could get. And when she brought home a videotape of Mr. Tony Robbins teaching how to have rapport, I became hooked. I became hooked as a young teenager. And then my mom bought me a ticket to a Tony Robbins seminar for high school graduation. So instead of a car, I got Tony. And then I was like, this is the coolest environment ever. I get to dance on chairs in the daytime and we get to hug strangers and there's music. And I thought, this is unbelievable. And then I went to college. I was like, this is boring. And I worked so hard to get into, I went to Gonzaga and I worked really hard to get into Gonzaga. But after going through Tony's Firewalk seminar, I could not get it out of my heart that I wanted to learn from him. And so after 3 semesters of going to Gonzaga, I opted out and I traveled the world with Tony. I volunteered for his organization, and it was one of the most craziest, courageous things I've done. And I'm very grateful that I did that because that's why I got the very rare opportunity of becoming a coach at 21 for Tony's organization. And I learned about assessments, and assessments changed my life. So I learned about the DISC assessment, and I wouldn't be a coach. I wouldn't have gotten hired with Tony, Jacob, because not only was I 21, but I looked 12. And I had very little life experience, Yeah. And there really was no reason for me to get hired now looking back, but I had the passion of Rudy wanting to play for Notre Dame. If you've seen the movie Rudy, like if you could picture Mandy being like, I want to be a Tony Robbins coach. Like it was just insane. So I went through his very gruesome at the time interview audition experience. And it was a man by the name of Robert Alderman taught the DISC assessment.
Okay.
And that changed my life. It really helped me understand myself in a way that gave me the confidence to be a coach, because before that, I thought, Jacob, that I was dumb. I thought that I am not that smart. I did admin for Tony and I was terrible at it. And then when I learned the DISC and Robert taught it, I realized, oh, someone like myself should never do admin, Jacob. You would never want me to do
just a bad fit, not a bad person. Yeah.
But I got confirmation that working with people was a natural superpower, and it was. I feel very fortunate. And so today, fast forward 26 years later, I've been coaching entrepreneurs for the past 26 years, and I've partnered with my dear friend Russell Brunson, and he got this vision of creating a software that combines, like, it's kind of like Facebook meets the top assessments. Okay. And so now I train other coaches and other entrepreneurs on understanding themselves and their team using assessments. And I'm geeking out every day and I'm having a blast every day, and it gives me so much joy. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you to hopefully inspire more people to understand themselves.
I love it. I have several follow-up questions. Before I get there, one more little intro question. I read a book called Master Your First Job. I asked my guests, I'd love to know, Mandy, what was your first job?
My first, I did like odds and ends here and there, but like my first real job, I kept for 3 years, and they hired me under the table because I was too young. At 13 and a half, 14 years old, I was a prep cook at a restaurant called The Triangle that's in Sweet, Idaho. So it was a small town, and I was a prep cook and I loved it. We played 50s and 60s music in the kitchen, and you know those like garnishes on your plate, like the green and with the beets, like I would do that. I did the fries.
Yeah.
And my dad said, this will never happen again in your life. Is at the end of my shift, I got paid $5 an hour, had one of those like old time like cash registers, and I would push the buttons on the cash register. I would get out, like if I worked 5 hours, which usually was what I worked, was $25, right? And so I would take out a 20 and I'd take out a 5 and I'd push it in, and then I'd write down on a piece of paper, Mandy, $25. And my dad was like, you'll never do that again. And because it was on the honor system, and I respected the owners. I never thought of stealing. And I was so young, I didn't understand how unbelievable that was. But it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
I love that. Gosh, I can't fathom using the honor system at Chick-fil-A where I work. Gosh, we had people who were leaders who couldn't even keep the safe even. A lot of money going in and out of there. Okay, assessments. So I think the first personality assessment I took was the DISC.
Was it?
I'm curious, what are you on DISC?
I am a very high IS. Like I have very low, no C, and my D is like 46, so I can like raise it if I need to. More of a lower D. I'm curious, what are you?
So like D and C are like almost even, and I and S are way down here. S is higher than I. But when you said it was just not the role for me, I was like, I bet C is just off the charts low. If that's the case.
Yeah. So do you know what they call? So they call the IS and the SI combination. We were talking about golden retrievers before we started. Is like the golden retriever of personalities, because we're so easy going, right? And do you know what they call the DCs?
I'm scared. Go ahead.
You're the CEO. So DCs make great CEOs because you have the D where you see the big vision and the big picture, and you've got the driver for results. But then you got the C that is more task oriented and detail oriented. So you could cross the T's and dot the I's. So you and I actually make a really good, we're great to be together on a team if we understand each other. I'm not going to be good at what you do, and you're not going to want to do what, like, what I do for a living, you would not want to do. You'd be like, oh my gosh, Mandy. And so we really complement each other.
Yeah. It's funny. So this was the first one I got into, and then I worked for a company in Chick-fil-A that really valued leadership development, and so I think I've taken every personality test. The most recent one, and this will align with the DC, is have you done the 6 types of working genius?
I don't have it on understand.me, but I'm actually looking at adding it to understand.me. And I'm not an expert on it, so I do have a lot to study and learn. I'm curious, what are you? What did you learn from yourself on that?
So high level, because I'm sure we could talk for an hour on just that. But there's a 6 parts, and they talk about it's really how you like getting work done. So they'll say every project is a 6-letter project, right? So WIDGET, widget is the acronym. I am U and T. So like beginning and end. Like I point out problems and say, here's kind of the direction we need to go. And then I like to come in at the end and cross every T, dot every I. It's the second least common type. The more gaps you have in between letters, the least common it is. I forget what the least common one is, but it's one of the unicorn types apparently.
Yes.
I guess a lot of people, they've gotten the data that have a lot of letters together. It gets more common than a lot of separation. But I thought that was funny. It aligned with with.
Yes. Because the DS is the most rare combination, and then the second
Okay.
is yours. And the second is yours is DC. And I'm curious if I may ask you, do you
Yeah.
ever feel like you have your foot on the gas and your foot on the brakes?
Absolutely. All the time, which is frustrating.
Yeah. Yes. So that's something that, if I may offer, because if you have any listeners who are also DCs, the thing that I've learned in working with you is that that is where you're a master and an artist, is that foot on the gas and the foot on the brakes. And the ones who have found harmony and have found to like enjoy who they are versus fighting it, it's all about awareness. And so if you could be like, okay, what's my big vision? What's going on? What do I want? Let's go fast. And you also honor the part of you that wants to be correct, that wants to do things right. And it's kind of like a dance between that. And the more that you give yourself permission to be both, the more that you just enjoy the journey, and you actually become more creative and productive.
I love that. I'll give you an example of this you might appreciate. So when I wrote my book, I wrote the rough draft in 24 days after having an outline. I had everything I wanted to talk about, but like starting to actually write to end first draft, 24 days, which was a lot. And I'm proud of that. I've probably spent more than that going back and forth with my cover designer to get the colors exactly right because I was so particular in formatting the book. I wanted spacing done a certain way between the lines. Like I did a research of where I should put page numbers and like title on the page. Way more time doing that than like writing the whole book, which is so I'm like, I like getting in the weeds and getting some of the detail stuff right.
That is
But
such a
yes,
beautiful
that
ex yes, that's such a perfect example. 24 days, wrote the book, bada bing, bada boom, but then where do I put the page on? Like, so that is such a great
yeah.
example. Yeah.
So this kind of talk, you sent me some stuff you wanted to talk about, which I think is so relevant to the audience, and I think this kind of plays into this self ownership. You talk about radical self ownership, and this is where I think assessments do a really good job to. I say like so, Enneagram is my favorite, and I've always said like the Enneagram doesn't put you in a box. I think it identifies the box you're probably already in. And my favorite thing about it is it gives me language and some reasoning to help me understand myself, right? Like, and I can get some adjectives in a good way too of ways to describe how I work and how I am that I can be proud of and lean into. And so you say radical self ownership is non negotiable. What does that look like in practice, especially for business leaders?
Well, before I go into that, I gotta
Yeah.
ask you, because I'm like so curious. What's your Enneagram?
What do you think?
I've learned, because Enneagram is one of my favorites too.
Okay.
And I've learned, because it's so internal, And this is where Enneagram is fascinating. And it is one of my favorites as a coach because it tells me what you look like when you're stressed, and it tells me what you look like when you shine. And so I've been humbled countless times, Jacob.
Too many times?
Yeah, because like DISC, I can do better at guessing someone's DISC because it's their behavioral, their communication style, right? But Enneagram, like someone could be, I was shocked when I found out that one of my funniest girlfriends from high school was an Enneagram 1. And I'm like, there's no way you're a 1. But so healthy. She looks like a 7 and she's funny and playful. Like I thought she was a 7, but she's actually a 1 and she's the healthy version of a 1. So I tend to be hesitant on guessing.
No, I 100% get that. I'm an 8, Enneagram 8.
Really? Wow. Yeah. Okay. So I like to say that I collect 8s as friends. Do you know why?
Loyal? Protective?
Fierce, protective. Like I feel like 8s are like the mobsters of friends. Like you mess with Mandy, you mess with me. It's like you have what I love about you 8s is that once someone is in your inner circle, you will protect and defend and fight for them. But if they're not in Jacob's inner circle, that's not your responsibility, right?
Yep.
And
that's right.
I don't know if you know this about 8s, but one of my favorite things about 8s is that you have that resistance and that fear of being vulnerable. But once you lean into that, you are the most beautiful 2s. And a lot of people thought that Mother Teresa was, but she wasn't. She was an 8. She looked like a 2. And that is so beautiful. When you really lean into, I mean, all of us, when we lean into our shadow, when we lean into that part that we're like, I'm not really comfortable with it. And it just brings up all the stuff. But when we have the courage to lean into it, that is when we really make an impact. And ironically, that's actually when we explode as far as success.
It's huge. I mean, vulnerability. I know that's in my blind spot for a long time. I've done a lot of work to lean into that this year. Picking the self-ownership. I mean, even I'll be vulnerable here. Started seeing a counselor this year. The first time in my life. My wife had a lot of success with it just growing up, some stuff she went through. And I'm like, I'm not going through some huge trauma right now, but I kind of want to, as someone who's like a solopreneur now and have my own business and have a family, I'm like, I want to be the best version of myself. So why don't I talk to someone who's really good at just working on my brain and showing up well? And that's really big. And I feel like I've been able to open up to friends more this year. And I just think it's maybe better in all areas, kind of opening up with that vulnerability. So yeah, I love that. My wife's a 2. So I always say it's great that she's I'm like, oh yeah, you're the healthy version of me. And I'm like the unhealthy version of you. So, you're better than I am and I can live with that. No, it's great. We have great balance. She helps me be kind and graceful, and I help her have a backbone, I say, and stick up for herself. So it's a win-win, right?
It really is. It really is. And can I just say that I really love, thank you for sharing that you're seeing a counselor. It gives me inspiration, especially men. And I really want to applaud you that you're doing it not because there's a 911.
Yeah.
It takes, especially as an 8, I know that takes a lot of courage. And what's funny is I know a lot of 2-8 couples. And
Really?
So yes. And it's it can be a really hard combo and it could be a really beautiful combination. But the fact that you're aware of it is very beneficial for your marriage and for your children and your future children coming.
Yeah, that's right. And that's where I want to be, right? Is like being the best version of myself for them. Obviously, I'm going to see the benefit of it, but really as my kids deserve the best version of me. And that's really big for me. So I appreciate you saying that. I mean, this is a good question too, then. Like talking Enneagram, personality, all that kind of stuff. Like, what patterns do you see when someone avoids both sides? So owning their gifts and what they're good at, and then also not owning the blind spots that they do have.
Oh, such a good question. It's really interesting. I'm going to make a confession to you, Jacob. So I've been coaching entrepreneurs for the past 26 years. And for the past 10, I've had the privilege and honor of coaching 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs because of my friendship and my trust with Russell Brunson, because I've been a part of his mastermind, his inner circle, and he's trusted me to be the coach. And for the past 10 years, I have felt like Indiana Jones on a quest to figure out why the heck are so many of these brilliant entrepreneurs struggling with their team. Like, I was scratching my head. They are so driven. They don't need any coaching on drive. Like, they're already got a high octane, rocket ship to the moon drive. And they have these brilliant minds. I mean, they're like the Olympic athletes. It's like when you look at an Olympic athlete and you look at their body and you're like, yeah, there's no way I'm going to invest that much and have that body, but I can appreciate that for being able to do that, those handstands, those flips, or ice skating, or whatever it is. These 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs, they're like Olympic athletes with their minds and their intelligence and their drive. Yet they really struggled with team and their personal relationships. And I didn't really know why until I faced my stuff. So, like, you say your blind spots, I say like your shadow, because every light has a shadow, right? So we all have a light.
That's good.
And the light of, like, let's say, for example, yourself is an 8, is you are extremely good in business. In fact, the inner circle and Russell's 7, 8, 9-figure club, they're primarily, could you guess what top 2 Enneagram types there are that are in his group?
Gosh, 8 and 7, 8 and 3,
8 and 3. And then 7 is the third place. 7's the third place. So it's 3s, 8s, and then 7s. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, that's all assertive types, right?
Yeah.
So it just shows that having that ability to be naturally assertive does help in business. But there's a shadow, and that shadow side is relationships and intimacy and vulnerability and all the stuff that most of the 3s, 8s, and 7s go bleh. Come on, talk to me about making money. Talk to me about lead generation.
Right.
Don't
That's
talk
right.
about emotions and intimacy and vulnerability.
Who cares?
Yes, exactly. But that's why I can tell you right now, I'm not a psychic. I always thought that would be cool to have that gift, but I don't have that gift. But I can already tell you that you are going to be more successful and make more money because you're in counseling, because you are you're willing to be vulnerable. You can't go to a counselor and not be vulnerable. So 8's biggest fear and shadow is vulnerability, and 3s are that way too, but theirs is different in that they don't want to appear like a failure or a loser, and they really care more about what people think. I find 8s don't really care as much about what people think. And you're also a low I. It's more about just don't make me vulnerable. I don't want to be vulnerable. So mine is, I'm a 9, Jacob. Peace.
Okay.
I'm the peace.
Love it. That's right.
So that's why I'm good at having patience and listening. And my light has been compassion and patience and being really genuinely curious and caring about my clients. But my shadow has been being more of a people pleaser and saying yes when I want to say no. And my biggest fear is like conflict. Like, I'm going to run away from conflict. And so in order for me to grow, I was avoiding my shadow. And so you asked, like, what happens when you don't look at your blinds? What happens when you don't own your strength? Such a beautiful question. Your one or two or both things happen. You either develop an affliction because your body can't handle it anymore and you start getting sick, like physically sick, and or you start developing an addiction. So it's an affliction or addiction or both. And for me, mine manifested as migraines and chronic anxiety and fatigue. And then I became addicted to TV because I would just disassociate and I'd watch a bunch of TV. And I didn't understand, of course, consciously everything that was happening. But thankfully, I got great help and I got encouraged to look at my blind spots, to look at my stuff. And I started setting boundaries and I started facing my greatest fear, which the greatest fear of the nine is loss of separation. And so I started setting boundaries and I had a breakup with my 30 plus year best friend that I called him my right arm, my soul brother. We did everything together. We were like peas and carrots. And we ended up having a falling out when I started setting boundaries. It was new to him. He wasn't a bad person, but you know that saying, we teach people how to treat us? Yeah, I taught the people around me that my needs didn't matter. And so when I started
Yeah.
valuing my needs, it was weird for them. And so I faced my fear of losing some friendships. I went through a divorce in 2023 that was really painful, very difficult, but I don't regret it. And I don't regret marrying my beautiful husband, the man that I married. He was and is a beautiful person. But for a nine to go through as many breakups and confrontation that I have,
Yeah.
what that's done is now I'm not living from a place of fear. I'm not running from my shadow. I'm like, yeah, I don't like confrontation. Yeah, I need a pause when someone asks me a request to do something. My knee jerk reaction is, yes. Like if you're like, Mandy, would you come over and help us move on Saturday? I just want to say, yeah, Jacob, that sounds, because I want to make you happy and I want you to like me so bad. Right. So I've had to learn how to pause and go, you know what, Jacob, thanks so much for thinking of me, but I think I'm going to pass on that. Right. And that's been very difficult. But what it's done is now today, I have the best relationships that I could, I didn't even know this level of happiness was possible. I didn't even know, like, the level of happiness, the level of joy, the level of fulfillment that I feel now. That's not, the Tony Robbins culture was a lot of willpower and force. And I'm like, this is not like a power move of confidence or happiness, Jacob. This is just like genuine, wow, I'm really grateful to be alive. And I wouldn't have it had I not faced my shadow. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I think I love the idea of self awareness, right? I think the best leaders are the ones who are most self aware. In that, again, I think it's about being aware of your blind spots and not even necessarily getting good at them, right? Like that, it doesn't have to be a strength. It's being aware of it so that when a situation comes up where you're in your blind spot, you know it's a blind spot. You can get help and maybe lean into someone else who's better at that. Which that's something else you've talked about is this idea of. I know you said these like really, really good people who then struggle to build a team. So, something you've associated with that is curiosity. Curiosity is one of my favorite things. I read a chapter about it in my book. You have a quote from Walt Whitman. I have a quote from another Walt that I love, Walt Disney.
I
So
love
he
Walt Disney.
said, me too. We keep moving forward, opening new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. Probably my favorite quote is, you hear curiosity killed the cat. I just firmly disagree. I'm going to agree with Walt on this one. Is that curiosity opens new doors. I'd love for you to share your Walt Whitman quote. How does that really apply to a business set?
Oh my gosh. I mean, curiosity is everything. I think that when we stop becoming curious, that's when we start dying. I mean, not to sound
Yeah,
dramatic, that's like, to me, curiosity is the lifeblood of the human soul. And it takes courage to be curious, because to be curious, I'll take an eight and a three, for example. For an eight to be curious, you need to be vulnerable because you need to admit, I don't know. Right. And for a three to be curious, it's also scary because threes want to look like the winner. All I do is win, win. Like that is the three. They want to look like the winner, the achiever. They
that's
want to
right.
look like they have all the answers, right? So to be curious, it requires, I'm not sure. I don't know. And so it takes tremendous courage. But I love Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman, I always say, when I went through my divorce and I thought, Jacob, I'm never going to be in another relationship. I don't want to date because it was so painful. And I know that some other people can relate to that. And it was Walt Whitman that brought me back to life. So I have to thank Walt. I have so many of his quotes that I love. Will you remind me, which quote did I send you?
Yes. Oh, goodness.
If not, I think I found it.
That's
Is it
okay.
the happiness quote?
Yes.
Happiness not in another place, but this place, not in another hour, but this hour. That is one of my favorites because, being a coach, my conversation with most people is the future. What do you want? What do you want
Right.
to create?
Right.
And I love that quote about, not being in another place, not being in another time, but being right here, right now. And every wise sage that I've studied, whether it be from Gandhi to Jesus to Buddha to Martin Luther King Jr., they've all virtually said the same thing. And that is to be here now, to be present now. And it's easier said than done. But once like I'm enjoying this conversation with you, like I get to talk to you about these assessments and people, and I'm present with you right now. I'm not thinking about anything
Right.
else, and it's enjoyable. And you know, once we're done, this moment will have passed, and I'd rather be fully present and enjoy every moment.
I love it. I feel like we could talk for another hour on probably just we could do an hour on Enneagram, hour on DISC. You a Strength Finders fan or Strengths Finder? Good Clifton Strengths. Okay.
You would love to
Competition's
understand.
my number one. Is that surprising from an 8?
But that is a great strength to have as an entrepreneur. That's Russell's number one. That's another one of my
Really?
clients who makes well over 20 million a year is number one. So you being an 8 and you having number one competition, you being a DC, Jacob, you are definitely an entrepreneur.
Well, I appreciate it. It's one of these things where again, that's why I like assessments is I read competition in a strengths assessment and my first reaction was really? I'm like, just because I'm like, that's a strength because I'm like, that tends to only get me in trouble. It makes me a really big sports fan, which leads to just great emotional disappointment because only one team can win the championship every year, right? Most years, my team's not going to win. In fact, until 2020, none of my favorite teams have ever won a championship in my lifetime. So just, board games become no fun because if I don't win, it's not fun. But yeah, then to see it as a strength, and I work with a coach and they pointed out other people in the Chick-fil-A organization, which I was with, who had competition and kind of how it played out in business. And I was like, oh, like it was really cool to see this is how this can look in a business setting. And this is how it can be really successful, which again, kind of going back to what we've been talking about, just like self-awareness, uh, self-ownership of like owning that and being like, okay, I'm going to lean into that. And this is something good about me that I can, do good work as a result of. Then you and I do something similar in that I work with people to help them. I say build their dream team. You said build world class teams, which I love, and I can see how it plays itself out there too. I love assessment. We could do another hour on this, I'm sure.
I would love that. I love this. I love this conversation because I think a lot of people, the number one objection I get if I get resistance to assessments, I don't want to be put into a box. And I
Yeah,
love what you said. I don't know if I'm getting it verbatim, but you said something about you're probably already in a box. You just don't know it. And
yeah,
assessments to me help break out of it because like you said, when I started to understand like my Enneagram, I was like, oh, no wonder I am like just terrified of conflict because I thought, does that make me a bad coach? Like
yeah,
I was able to have compassion for myself. And that's where I'm sure you've heard a lot of people use the term imposter syndrome. And, you know, imposter syndrome, do you know what imposter syndrome is?
tell me.
Shame. It's shame.
Huh.
Imposter syndrome is shame. It's to me when when someone says it's like the achiever's word for shame because an achiever, an entrepreneur doesn't want to say I hate myself or I am ashamed of who I am. They don't say
Yeah,
that. So it's a softer way of saying I have shame or I'm scared. I have imposter syndrome. That sounds more like also syndrome, like
yeah,
diagnostic, right?
yeah,
But what it
that's right.
really is it's a form of amnesia because you're forgetting who you really are. Because when you embrace who you really are, you don't have imposter syndrome. When I would call it imposter syndrome when I've gone to some of these events with these clients who are crushing it, making 7, 8, 9 figures. And I had imposter syndrome, AKA shame, because I thought, who am I to be Coach Mandy when I wasn't making their income? Right. And then when I owned, oh, wait a minute, if I was like them, then I wouldn't be doing what I do. Right. I would need a Mandy. I would need another me to listen to. And so once I understood who I was and my role and my place, it was liberating. And so that's one of the reasons why I love these assessments too. And I'm so glad I didn't know that you had so much awareness of them too. I find that really fun. So I definitely could keep talking to you for another hour, Jacob.
I love it. I'll add one more quote kind of to your point you just made. Phil Knight, he's the founder of Nike, has a quote: when you truly when you believe in who you, excuse me, I'm going to butcher it now. It's when you understand who you are, it enables you to fight and believe. And I like that a lot. I put that at the beginning of, I wrote in my book a chapter on just personal branding. And that was kind of my setup of your personal brand is what you're known for. And so if you want to build a good one, like one, understand yourself, and the two, just represent that well so that you're known for something you're proud of. And that when we think of companies, we get a feeling or a thought pops in our head whenever we see a logo. And that's what they're known for. That's their brand. And so what's yours? It's kind of the setup. But I love that from Phil Knight of when you understand who you truly are, that's what's going to enable you to fight and believe, which I think that's really good. And he built a pretty good brand too.
Yeah,
not that long ago, which is crazy. Not too shabby. Yeah. Oh man, this has been great. If there's one takeaway from today for our audience, what would it be?
I would say, I'm going to bring back my buddy Walt Whitman. Be curious, not judgmental. I find that we're so hard on ourselves, and it's not just judgmental for other people, it's judgmental to yourself. And the stuff that you don't like about yourself, like I have not liked that I was a people pleaser and not liked that I was so of confrontation. I was always a little envious of you Enneagram 8s because you were like, bring it, you'd be more direct. And when I leaned in to that and embraced it, it makes life so much more fun. And so whatever you don't like about yourself, be curious, not judgmental.
I love it. Mandy, where can people connect with you or work with you?
Yeah, so I have a free gift that I'm super excited about sharing with your audience. If they go to understandingpersonality.com, you can get a PDF of my book, Understanding Personality. And it's so interesting. When Russell asked me to write this book, I was like, Jacob, how is this possible? He wants me to put all these assessments into one book. This is going to be like a 1,000-page book. But what Russell said was, Mandy, I want you to write it for entrepreneurs who don't want to necessarily geek out as much as you on assessments, but they just want to know bada bing, bada boom. So it's really written for you high Ds, to be honest, because it's like the bottom line.
Give me the Cliff Notes. Get the point.
Cliff Notes version of Myers-Briggs, of StrengthsFinder, of Enneagram. It's all the Cliff Notes version. It's really nice just to be I use it myself, even though I wrote it, I don't have it all memorized. So sometimes I'm like, I'm talking to this client and I reread what I wrote about this type to refresh my memory. And so it's really powerful for hiring if you're a manager or a business owner. And it's definitely a must if you're a coach, because you'll understand your clients and you understand yourself. So it's a lot of fun.
I love it. It's very generous. I'm going to have that linked here in the episode description. So if you're listening, episode description, you can click that link and get that from Mandy. And if you're watching, that's down below. Click that link. Take advantage. Free book. Those don't come around often. So Mandy, thank you so much for being a guest. Really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you to everybody for watching and listening to this episode of the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. Take care.